All right. Hello, friends. I am Christy Hughes, and you're listening to Rock the Damn Boat. If you've ever bitten your tongue to keep the peace or said yes when every part of you wanted to say no, this one's for you. We're diving into the messy, real stuff that people pleasers like me have spent years avoiding. It's time to have the hard conversations, shake things up, and learn to stand tall even when it makes waves. And if you know anything about me, you know I'm 5'2", have played it small my entire life. So this idea of standing tall is just really what I'm trying to embody, to play it big, to take up space, which does not come naturally to me. And so if you've been listening and that resonates with you, then I am glad you are here, because we can always learn to expand our comfort zone a little bit. And one of these episodes, I will dive into the science behind that and, helping to quell our fight or flight response. There are lots of tools to help with that, and I have used a multitude of them. One of the things I love to do is, if you are watching this episode, you'll see I've got my shiny leopard print, cheetah print shirt on. Whenever I record, as often as I can, I am wearing a shirt that is a tiger, a leopard, a lion. I like to embody big cat energy, because if you think about big cats and their ability to be fierce and ferocious and also be calm and patient at times, then who wouldn't want to embody that style of energy? And it seems like every time I need a little bit of push in one direction, and I draw from my Animal Spirit deck by Kim Kranz, I get the cheetah. And the cheetah is all about like being fierce and ferocious when you need to, stalking your prey, being really fast and being able to embody that energy. I also talked on one of my episodes about Step Into Your Moxie by Alexia Vernon, and she also used that cheetah analogy, being between a rabbit and dragon. So if we're a rabbit, we're really meek and mild and play it small, and we're prey animals. If we're dragon energy, then we step all over people, and we're so direct that we border on being rude. And I'm sure you know plenty of both of those people in your lives. How do you find that middle ground, that cheetah energy, where you're using exactly what you need in a methodical way, but also not being meek like a rabbit? So I've got my full-on cheetah energy here today, and I wanted to talk about my sobriety journey. And so many of my friends and family that are listening to this podcast and supporting me in a big way know all about my sobriety story and my journey with alcohol, writing my sobriety memoir that I published in 2021. I've been on multiple podcasts about the book, so there's plenty of episodes you can go back and hear my story in a different way, or with a different person who was hosting. But I am here for you to hear it straight from the horse's mouth today. And if you are new to me or new to this podcast, then maybe you'll hear something that resonates with you, and you might decide to kick any kind of crutch or bad habit to the curb. And that's what I'm hoping to do here. I wrote a book, and I have one of my early author copies here, called Strong Roots, Wayward Soul, a story of sobriety, tenacity, and the timeless wisdom of grandmothers. And we'll get to how that title came to be and what that story exactly is. But if you really want to dive into what I captured back then in 2021, when I was just a few years sober, then you can read that book. has all kinds of different parts of my life that I explored. So, not just sobriety, but also my spiritual path and being raised in a certain way and not feeling that connection through church or organized religion and where that led me. I talk all about different love disasters and different relationships that were so detrimental for my people pleasing personality, and how I gave my all to people who did not deserve my love and affection. I talk about my sobriety and different ways that I tried to get sober. And I'm even looking because I feel like there's a couple of parts that I am forgetting that I talked about, but it's been 4 years since I wrote this book, and I'm certainly been working on a follow-up to it, but that is slow going. So yeah, okay, so rising and purpose were a couple of other different things I talked about. And it was so funny because when I got sober and wanted to follow in my grandmother's footsteps as a generous teetotaler, I tried every hobby that she was talented at. Okay, I'm going to play the piano, and I had her piano. I'm going to learn to sew. I did all of these things that I thought I would just have a natural talent at because I was Polly's granddaughter. Yeah, none of those worked out. So here I am, a yoga teacher and yoga studio owner. I'm a writer and have written a book, obviously. I write a weekly blog. So there's other ways that my talents have come forth that don't have anything to do with Polly Campbell, as much as I love all of the talents that she offered to the world. So let's get into my sobriety story, and it starts when I was around 15, I think. I was really struggling in my teenage years. I don't know now if I looked back and read things about borderline personality disorder or even ADHD with rejection sensitivity. There was a lot of that at play. And I know, and especially now as I'm going through menopause and as a 50-year-old woman, and what my hormones are doing now, which is another story for another day. With what I'm experiencing now, I can understand how changing hormones as a 13, 14, 15-year-old girl were wreaking havoc on my body, on my mindset, on my mental health. And I was really struggling at that time. I have read old journals, and offering a trigger warning here, I read old journals and I had swallowed a bunch of pills. I think it was allergy medicine or something at the time, and I don't remember that to this day. It was only in reading about that that I really understood the magnitude of what was happening for me at that age. And I wrote in my journal that I was disappointed by waking up the next day, and I was super tired at school all day because I was just groggy and drowsy from this medication. It was around that time that I started to, 15-year-old, getting interested in boys, and I did not deal well with rejection. I wanted to be like my friends, and my friends were tall, and I thought they were tall and glamorous, and they were going out for different modeling jobs because they were 5'8" and 5'9", and modeling and pageants and all of these things. And here I was, 5'2", feeling especially nerdy, not cute. And I had big glasses, I had permed hair. I was all the ways that you end up being. You look back at old pictures and you're like, wow, I was a little bit of an ugly duckling. We'll put it that way. So I definitely grew into my beauty, and I know I shine inner beauty. So inside out, I love all of that and my mindset today. But back then, look back at pictures, a little bit of an ugly duckling. I was really smart. So I got attention for being smart and top of the class, but not for being cute and girlfriend material. So I really vied for attention from boys, and that meant maybe putting myself out there in ways that didn't respect my body, that I didn't respect myself. My self esteem was non existent. And all of these things, again, looking back, were probably related to what may have needed a diagnosis at that time, but I just don't think that we knew as much about mental health, and especially mental health in teenagers, as we do today. So this was, late 80s, early 90s. I got rejected by a boy at one point, and I was so distraught that I cut my arms. And I did that as a physical release for that pain that I was feeling inside, and I didn't know where to put that. And within a week or so, my mom saw it. I started group therapy, and we worked on. I started journaling. I started going to group therapy. We were working on different ways to make me feel comfortable and at ease with who I was. But around the same time, I went to a concert with my brother and had a wine cooler. And we were on the lawn at whatever the amphitheater is called in Dallas today. I think it's changed names a few times, so I don't know what it is today anyway, but it was, we had lawn seats for a concert. I remember feeling free and, that buzz, and relaxed more so than I had ever felt in my life, especially at a time in my life where I was feeling so uncomfortable in my body and so uncomfortable with, socially awkward and social anxiety. So that alcohol helped free everything and free me from that super self-conscious behavior and anxiety. So quickly enough, that became a crutch. And, 15-year-olds, we were certainly dabbling in my friend group with, sneaking alcohol from mom and dad's liquor cabinet. And we had off-campus lunch. So there were times where we might go to somebody's house and have a little drink of something out of the liquor cabinet. When I would go with my friends to the park, we were hanging out with older boys and they would bring beer. So we'd have beer at the park. And it's one of those things where you could say kids will be kids, like teenagers drink. I get that. That's going to be a universal truth. You will never be able to stop teenagers and kids from experimenting with alcohol. Thankfully, I'm hearing that Gen Z doesn't like to drink as much. However, I am learning more and more that it's because they like plant-based drinks. So, not quite innocent, but not maybe as detrimental as alcohol. I don't know. But I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to talk about my story. So teenager, started getting involved with alcohol. I remember coming home one night. I don't remember where we had been, but I was so sick off of Strawberry Hill. And I feel like so many children of the teenagers of the 90s have a Strawberry Hill story. Boone's strawberry Boone's Farms, whatever that was called. Some people have Mad Dog 2020 stories. Whatever your, kind of predates wine coolers or White Claw or any of those other trendy drinks right now, what we could get our hands on the cheap was Mad Dog and Boone's. I remember coming home one night and I was so sick and I was in my room and I remember I had a Coca-Cola trash can and I got sick in my trash can. And I don't remember how I cleaned it up or if my parents ever knew about it or anything. And so if they didn't, oh gosh, yeah, sorry. I was a teenager. I got sick in my Coca-Cola trash can. Did that stop me? No. Did that stop me for another 30 years? No. So I learned really quickly that alcohol made me feel better and it completely erased that social anxiety, that self-consciousness, and all of these things that made me worry in my mind. Went off to college. Now I was still making excellent grades. And I was making A's and B's. I graduated the top 10% of my class. I talked about people pleasing and kind of that self-conscious behavior last week and talked about being a hands-on learner. So as long as school was hands-on and I could do well in class and with those lessons in class, I was fine. And I was really only drinking on the weekends, so it wasn't as if it was a daily behavior. Still, as a teenager, illegal behavior. But again, kids will be kids. So I was graduating top 10% of my class. I went off to Texas A&M, so I got into Texas A&M. I made Dean's List my first semester. I got, I think, a 3.5, and I was like thinking I was going to be on track to just ace college. Then I started drinking heavily in college and learning that I enjoyed socializing far more than I enjoyed studying. I had an older boyfriend when I went off to college, so we were drinking together at times. And I fell into a crowd with a good friend and later roommate of mine who had an older brother. So there was no shortage of ways to have access to alcohol in college. And again, there never will be. You could go back and watch the movie Animal House or any other movie about college, and there's heavy drinking involved, partying, all of those things. But the difference between my college alcohol experience and others is that I was becoming more reliant on it as a coping mechanism. So whereas other kids might drink and wake up the next day and they're fine and they're not even thinking about that, I started to create this link between how I felt when I was drinking and feeling carefree and like I was the life of the party and so at ease with myself that I created that link between how I felt and the alcohol. And I wanted to drink more to recreate that feeling of freedom. I started going to the bar all the time. So I was in College Station. So, of course, Northgate, big place for college students to go drink. We had friends who were bartenders at the Dry-Bean Saloon, which, if you don't know, in College Station is a shot bar. So it's one long, skinny room, bar all the way from front to back. I think there's some tables in the front, but the back half is just a bar, like almost single space. So you can be up at the bar and maybe one person can walk behind you, but it's this like really narrow, long shot bar. And pretty much that's what people do what they drink there is they would go there and get shots. They had this huge menu of all different sorts of shots. So Goldschlager, Rumpelmints. We would drink a lot of Sex with an Alligator, which is, I can't even remember, but whatever liquor was in it, it was green. And then there was a brown liquor they put that would layer at the bottom. So it was thicker, and that would go to the bottom. And then the green, it was like maybe Midori and I can't remember. But anyway, you would think I would remember because of how many I drank. But those kinds of shooters, flaming Dr. Pepper. So they had a drink where they set it on fire. Had a coworker who actually burned his face taking a flaming Dr. Pepper shot. Yeah, not smart and not safe. And I don't know if they still serve those today, but wow. Definitely blow it out before you drink it. All the things. Like, name a shot, I've probably had it. And we were doing that all the time. And it started to creep into the weekdays, and my grades started to slip. And I started to really have some mental health issues as in conjunction with my drinking. There was a night that I was flirting with a guy at the dance hall, and this was after my boyfriend and I had broken up. I realized very quickly that college meant that there was a much larger pool of guys to choose from, and my boyfriend was really serious at the time, and I just was not there. I mean, I was 18 years old, he was 23, so we parted ways. I was flirting with a guy at the dance hall, came home. I was already on medication for depression, and I ended up attempting to leave this earth. And I called a friend, had my stomach pumped, and you would have thought that drinking and that situation would have been a bigger part of how I tried to recover at that time. Wasn't, went back to group therapy, really didn't address the drinking issues whatsoever. I don't know. I'm sure there is, well, actually, there are a lot of reasons and a lot of explanations today as to why people become addicted to certain things. Whether it's a dopamine imbalance, whether it's trauma, whether it's coping mechanisms. There are things, the way that our brains work to become addictive personalities. And that's not, some people it's gambling, some people it's food, some people it's sex. There are lots of addictions, and there are certainly reasons that our brains function that way. So for me, didn't change a thing. Kept drinking, started to black out. And I would drink so much that I would wake up strange places, strange people, and not remember what had happened the night before. And it was scary, especially as a college student. I remember going on vacation in Mexico, and I could have ended up a Natalie Holloway story. I was not smart, and I was not coherent and not having memories of what was happening. There is a movie that came out a few years ago called A Promising Young Woman, and that movie reminded me so much of myself. And if you watched it and it disturbed you a little bit, I mean, there are people out there who, like women like me, who don't remember what happens when they drink. And there's probably plenty of men as well, but as women, we put ourselves in dangerous situations when we do that. So, made it through college. Definitely had a drinking issue and a dysfunctional relationship with alcohol all the way through college. I graduated. I lived with my parents for about 6 months. So I think that helped me, get a handle on things. Plus, I had my first grown up job. So I was wanting to be more responsible. And I would say that my drinking maybe backed off to a normal level for most of my 20s. I hung out with friends. I went to happy hour. So maybe I was going to happy hour a little bit more often. Maybe I was drinking more drinks than my friends at happy hour. But I feel like most of my 20s, kind of early 30s, it was at a reasonable or manageable level. I didn't question what was happening. I didn't black out. I did get married in 2001. So for those 7 years, I was being more responsible, spending more time at home. Yes, I would go out to happy hour with my girlfriends, but I would come home at a reasonable hour, or I would be out with my ex husband. So there was a certain amount of responsibility and maturity that came with first job, first house, early 20s. Maybe not as much, just spending money, wanting to save money, be at home. So things were good for a while until they weren't. And when I got divorced, which I would say the last 6 or 7 months we were separated, and I went full off the wagon, like full on off the wagon, fully into the deep end of drinking and depression, and started dating someone who, I think I called him Drew in the book, but started dating someone who was terribly toxic, terribly toxic. We would spend all of our time together drinking. I would drink 9, 10, 11 nights in a row, sick. It was really toxic for me. It was toxic for my job. I ended up getting demoted, and I knew that something needed to change, but I was so powerless to change anything about it. And I was so caught up in this trap of people pleasing and caretaking and codependency that I was diving from one relationship to another and lost myself. And I think back to that teenage girl who was so lonely and had no self esteem and just didn't know who she was, had no self identity. I can't even describe it, but I just felt like such an empty person, an empty shell of a person. And all of that came flooding back when I got divorced. So I was hanging out with this guy who was terrible for me. We broke up. Actually, he ended up moving. He reconnected with an ex-girlfriend from high school at a high school reunion, ended up moving back to Austin. I think he married her. I don't really know. I don't care. We don't keep in touch, but that was definitely a low point in my life when he disappeared, ghosted me. I ended up a few months later jumping into a relationship with someone 10 years younger than me who was a raging alcoholic. And same thing, we were spending all of our time at bars drinking. I was blacking out, didn't remember what our evenings were like. The only reason that I was mildly responsible was A, I had a job, and B, he had a daughter. And so if she was with us, I had to be the responsible one. And I talked about that in my motherhood episode, that I had to pick up where he left off, and where he would be passed out in our bedroom and she couldn't wake him up, and she would turn the TV on and she was left to her own defenses. So I had some semblance of responsibility then, but it wasn't much, and it wasn't saying much. And when things got really ugly with us, and again, I write about all of that in my memoir, Strong Roots, Wayward Soul. When things got really bad with us and we broke up, I moved to Arizona. I wanted it to be a fresh start. And if you are a recovering alcoholic or been in a recovery program, you know that those geographic changes that we try to make to run away from our addiction or to get that fresh start nearly never work. And all I did was a few months into my new job in Arizona, I bought a house that was near a dive bar. I started spending 3, 4, 5 nights a week at the dive bar. I was driving to the dive bar, and even though it was just a couple of miles from my house, how stupid was I to get behind the wheel ever? And I look back now and wonder how nothing happened. And another recovery topic is around yet. Nothing had happened yet. So I had not had a DWI yet. I had not injured myself or anyone else yet. Thank God I quit before any of those things happened. But I am so frustrated with myself. And I used to be ashamed. I used to be ashamed of myself, but I know now that all of those things had to happen for me to end up where I am today and end up wanting to inspire others, having spent the last 7.5 years building courage and confidence to help others. So I'm happy and I'm proud of where I'm at today, and all of that had to come with what happened to me in the past. So I'm in Arizona and I start getting sober curious, and I met Ryan, my now husband, in 2014. And a funny story, it's funny now, but I went out to Sunday Fun Day with my friend Steven. We hung out, we had brunch, we did spin classes together, still one of my best friends in the whole world. He and I went to Sunday Fun Day with some of his friends. We were drinking bottomless mimosas. And of course, it didn't take long, few too many bottomless mimosas, to bottom out, black out. He sent me home in a Lyft or an Uber. I think it was a Lyft, but he sent me home in a car. Smart move on his part. It was probably noon or 1, and I was already 3 sheets to the wind. I get home, and I don't remember any of this, but apparently I called a Lyft and went to the dive bar down the street. I have no idea what happened other than I apparently hit on Ryan, who was sitting a couple of stools over, and spent the night with him and ended up having a sober date a week later. But all of this happened, and I had left my keys inside my house. So he had to crawl through my dog door the next morning and open my door for me and then let me into my own house. And sure enough, my keys were sitting on the kitchen counter. But all of that is absent from my memory bank. I didn't even remember his name, and I wanted him to write his phone number down and thought, oh, please let him write his name down. And thankfully he did. So here we are 11 years later. Should have been a one-night stand, but thank goodness it turned into a beautiful friendship and relationship. But when I met him, I did not want our fights and my blackouts to continue. And we met when I was about 39, and it would take me another 4 years to get sober, but I was having these thoughts that I needed to be a better girlfriend. And he would recount tales to me after the fact. He would tell me the night before that I called him no prize, or that I would be belligerent. And that doesn't surprise me because I was definitely a belligerent drunk. Or I would be like, I'm fine, when I wasn't. I get into some of those stories in the book, so read the book. But I definitely wanted to get sober because I didn't want these things to keep happening. Our fights were ridiculous when we were drinking, and not physical in any way. But he would usually get mad, and he only lived 4 streets away, so he would storm out, go back to his apartment. I'd cry. I'd think this was the end of us, and then we'd make up a couple of days later. So that happened over and over, and I got tired of it. And I knew that we had something, that God had put him in my path for a reason. I tried different things. I tried online chat forums. I tried quitting cold turkey. I tried, well, I was taking Wellbutrin for depression for a while, and that was supposed to help curb alcohol use. That didn't work. Most of the time I would try cold turkey, and I made it 30 days the first time. And then the second time I made it 60 days, and then I'd go back to drinking. And then the third time I made it 90 days, and I'd go back to drinking. So if I had been picking up 12-step chips during that time, I would have had more step 1 first day silver chips than enough to fill a drawer, which a lot of people say that happens to them. But I refused to go to 12-step because I thought, no, AA is for alcoholics. And I am not an alcoholic. I just am a bad drinker. I'm a blackout drinker. I'm a binge drinker, but never. I thought that alcoholics were people who had to drink every single day in order to function. What I failed to realize is that there were days where I had to drink to function. If I got super shit-faced on a Friday night, I would wake up on Saturday and start drinking mimosas with brunch or Bloody Marys because I felt so sick and so shaky. Now, did that happen every day? No. But as time went on, I would drink one day, spend the next day recovering from a hangover, and then drink the following day. So it was literally every other day that I was getting incredibly drunk. I had hoped that I would quit drinking while I was in Phoenix. And the very longest stint I went was, 110 days. And then Polly, my beloved grandmother, went to the hospital. And we knew it was the end. I needed a drink that night, so Ryan and I drank wine. I flew home to Texas. I was with my grandmother, and all of us were drinking wine to cope. It was hard for me because I had taken so much time off, and I felt frustrated and ashamed at that time of going back to this crutch that I was trying so hard to remove from my life. And after Polly died, I wanted to get home to Texas. I just had enjoyed being with my family for 10 days. I knew that I was missing a part of my life that was special with being close to family. So we moved back to Texas, and back for me. It was new for Ryan. He was from Pennsylvania, had lived in South Dakota. We met in Arizona, and so he moved to Texas. He was willing to come on this big adventure with me. I was staying at my grandmother's empty house, and I was drinking nonstop. I had started a new job, but I was sick all the time. When I was at work, I was drinking so heavily on the weekends. I remember one Saturday having to have Amazon Prime delivered to the house with anti-nausea medication and Gatorade. I was wrecking my body. And Ryan and I ended up buying a house, and we would drink in the backyard every other day. Like I said, I was doing this cycle on and off. I would drink heavily, black out, spend the next day recovering, and then turn around and drink on day 3. So every other day. I smoked like a chimney when I was drinking. So I was smoking and drinking and again, wrecking my body. It was terrible and I was desperate, and yet I didn't know what to do until I learned that our neighbor across the street attended 12-step meetings. And I asked her one day to drive me to the store to get more beer. I had already been drinking. We had already been drinking, me and Ryan. And I asked her to take me to the store because I knew that I shouldn't drive. So that was at least one smart move on my part. And there happened to be a big book sitting in her seat. And I asked about the book, and I knew she had told me before that if Ryan ever wanted to go to a meeting, that she would take him because he had had an accident and that was drinking related. And I ended up being the one to ask her to take me to a meeting. I had gone on a work trip. I had told myself I was not going to drink at dinner, and I did. And at that point, I knew that I was literally powerless over alcohol. So I went with a meeting to her a couple of days later. That was May 12th of 2018. I have been sober every day since. I occasionally have drinking dreams, which is not uncommon for people who stopped drinking, but it's just crazy when I have those because then I wake up and think, oh my gosh, I'm back at day one, and I'm not. It was just a dream, thankfully, but gosh, they can feel so real. So I attended meetings for a couple of years. Then COVID came along and meetings went online, and there's probably still a lot of meetings online today, but I found that it was tough not being in the room and connected with that energy in the same way. And around that time, I got super involved with yoga and my yoga community, and I was finding a lot of solace there and also connecting with sober women in that group. I thought for sure that AA and 12-step meetings were going to be my forever path. There was a podcast, I can't remember now what it's called or what it was called, but there was a woman who was rocking the damn boat around recovery by having walked away from AA meetings. And I thought that was crazy. I thought I would never do that. Like, how could you stay sober without attending 12-step meetings? Because I was so involved with them at the time. I moved into a different group of creative sober women. So there is still, you can find old episodes of the Unruffled podcast. So Tammy and Sandra were hosting a podcast for creative sober women, and some were in 12-step, but not all of them. And we started having meetings during COVID because that was just a way for us to connect and stay plugged into a sober community. So that was my path for a while. Those meetings ended, and I just by then had several years under my belt. And while that doesn't work for everyone, moving into this path of yoga and personal development worked for me. I started to push so hard into living my best life that there was no place for alcohol, period. I was waking up clear-headed. I was waking up bright and early. I was taking advantage of every hour of the day to do different things. I still do that today, and some would accuse me of staying a little too busy. I have my Kanban board behind me if you're watching this. Those are all of my to-dos. I cannot point in reverse. But if you take my Thrive coaching program or you come to my Thrive retreat at the end of January, then you'll learn more about the Kanban method of keeping track of everything that you have to do. So I love giving my all to growing, to helping others grow. And so at this point, there is literally no place for alcohol. There is no place for me to have that downtime of being hungover and sick. And as we do say in recovery, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And now, am I magically cured of everything? No, I still have chronic pain. I still have menopause symptoms. I'm going through this whole different chapter of life, but thank goodness I am not complicating that by drinking. So, I don't know for you if alcohol is a problem. I don't know if something else is a crutch for you. Food, sugar, toxic relationships, caretaking, people pleasing. There are a multitude of ways that we choose to numb out. Social media, scrolling, that's a big one that who knew that that was going to be an addiction just like alcohol or other things. If there is something that you are doing in excess that you have cognitive dissonance around, and that means that you really don't want to do it, but you can't stop yourself, then you're entering into addiction territory. And I'm not saying that to judge or shame you, because there are so many ways that you can start to heal from that addiction, that you can start to implement tools to be more mindful and grounded and create presence so that you're not always reaching for that crutch. And you may find that the hours that you save from not scrolling, from not drinking, from whatever you are using, TV, anything that you're using to numb out, you might be able to repurpose those hours and ignite a passion that you didn't even know existed. And that has been my gift of sobriety, that I have hosted women's retreats. I wrote a book and plan to write more, that I have found the confidence and courage to walk away from a corporate job to be self-employed, all of these things that I'm doing. I rocked the damn boat by looking at that behavior and choosing a different path. And no, it's not easy to not reach for a drink when you're out. And I am happy to share more about that part of my journey. If people want to hear about it, leave it in the comments. I can talk about what it felt like to overcome that social anxiety and to choose club soda or some other sort of fancy mocktail when everybody else was drinking. But for me, it has been such a rewarding journey that I don't feel like I am missing out whatsoever. So I hope that as you find your way out of toxic or negative habits, that as you start to grow and heal from whatever little t or big T trauma that you might have in your life that means that you reach for those coping mechanisms, I hope that you can find joy in the journey. I hope that you can unlock and ignite a passion. I would love to help you do that through my Thrive coaching model or through our Rise and Thrive retreat at the end of January. If you want to learn more about that, visit thrivewithchristy.com. And I appreciate you listening. Follow, subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode. If you could leave a 5-star review, I would be eternally grateful. And me and my cheetah energy are going to go tackle the rest of this day. I will talk to you again soon.